And now it's time for Mob Talk Radio with your host, Jeff Canarsie.
And welcome to Mob Talk Radio. I am your host, Jeff Canarsie. It is snowing its ass off in New York City. Second day of spring. I look out the window, and it's a fucking blizzard. Wow. So as you're going to notice, by the time that this show airs, obviously it's a day before you're going to hear it, or a day and a half, or 2 days before I think it's a day before you're going to hear it. I have stuff I got to do on Thursday, so I figured get it done, get it out. A lot of breaking, not a lot, but there's some breaking news we need to discuss as far as the Philadelphia Mafia goes. Yesterday there was news breaking that Sal Piccolo was arrested for selling meth to undercover FBI agents, and more stuff started to filter out. One of the other things that filtered out was the feds have a soldier or a higher-up, a made guy from the Philadelphia Mafia who has been on the FBI payroll since 2015. The feds also released criminal complaints that apparently either pills are being pressed as far as fentanyl and heroin's being sold, but there's a distribution network that's kind of involved in this, and it includes the Mafia, allegedly, according to criminal complaints. This is big news. This is big news for multiple reasons. And I said early on, I said, even going back 6 months ago, before the Merlino trial started to really get going, that what it was going to take for the FBI to cripple the Philadelphia Mafia in any sense of the imagination was going to be murders and narcotics. They weren't going to catch anybody with extortion, gambling, racketeering, the typical stuff that they normally get. They needed something big. They've had a hard-on for Joey Merlino for years, a lot like the FBI had a hard-on for the Gaudis. And I'm not even sure that this has anything to do with Joey Merlino or anybody else. This is just what's coming out. I also said just a couple, maybe 3 weeks ago, that this was coming. I knew indictments were coming. Rumors being what they are, I heard something very substantial that this was coming. So what are we involved with here? What exactly? First of all, I don't know everything. This stuff is slowly filtering out. What I can tell you, just on the basic premise of all of this, is it's not good. Granted, at this show, we don't particularly put any stock in informants. We never have, we never will. However, you got to start looking at things a little logically. The FBI having a hard-on for Philadelphia, especially Joey Merlino. They were going to look for murders and narcotics, because those are the two big things that carry the most weight and the most time in prison behind them. That being said, I don't know who the mole is. There's lots of rumors that I'm not going to get into, just because I don't want to throw anybody under the bus that may or may not have anything to do with it. I don't think it's fair to them. I'll let the Dave Schratweisers of the world and the George Anastasias of the world do that, because that's what they do. That's not me. I am not a journalist. I don't care what and how many people try to portray me that way. I'm not a journalist. That's not my thing. I cover things from a street perspective. I always have. I always will. That's the difference between me and everybody else that does what I do. Nobody else is doing street perspective. As far as what this means for Philadelphia going forward, I'm not even really sure. At best, I could speculate that if they truly do have somebody that's a made member of the Philadelphia mob on the payroll, it's really going to determine who they can connect the dots with. We've talked about this before, going back to the Merlino trial with J.R. Rubio. that, he might be able to connect dots, but he was a miserable witness for the government, so much so that the jury didn't buy it. Wayne Kreisberg, sort of the same way. He could tie the financials into it. He was miserable on the stand, a joke. The jury didn't believe him either. So what you now have is a situation where you have someone that is directly involved, not a fringe player, not a wannabe, not a guy that hangs out in certain circles that knows other people. Now you're talking about someone from within. And anytime you got somebody on a payroll from within, one, you already know out the gate they're going to lie. They're going to make up more shit than there really is. That's just the reality of the business. But it also means that there's going to be a million audio tapes and God knows everything else. So as this moves forward, I expect it to get a little dicey. How far up this is going to go, I'm not really sure. This could be just limited to 3 or 4 fringe guys with some made guys, or it could deal with the upper brass of Philadelphia. I'm not sure. I can't speculate on that. Only to say is, naturally, I don't think the FBI is going to invest time in a snitch to get a bunch of nobodies out in South Jersey. So I think the reality is there's a bigger target involved here. Plus, you got to figure something else that comes into play here. When you have somebody that's on the inside and begins ratting and snitching out, ultimately, he can snitch out a guy A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and what you got to hope is that guy C, D, E, and F don't decide they're going to rat on somebody too to get out of problems. And that's the way this starts. And so it's either going to crumble from within or it's going to crumble from the outside in. I do think that the FBI was playing games when they moved Anthony Nicodemo from a prison to move closer to Philly. I think that was sort of a gesture on behalf of the FBI to sort of threaten and intimidate some people. But I also think that perhaps looking into the Joey Merlino trial itself and the April 9th date that is coming up between Judge Sullivan and the attorneys and the government as far as what to do in the Merlino situation, I think this also plays a hand in that too. And I said it from day one in the trial. I said it to people that I spoke with there, that I firmly believed that this was just the beginning and that ultimately I don't think the FBI really truly gave a fuck. Joey may disagree with me on this. Other people that are directly involved may disagree with me. But ultimately, I didn't think the government really gave a shit whether they got Joey this time or not. And I think a lot of the big reason for that is they knew there was an indictment coming in Philly. That's the way it appears to go. Once again, Joey and anybody of consequence has not been mentioned in this trial, this indictment, other than Sal Piccolo getting arrested for selling meth to undercover agents twice over 50 grams. So that's a problem. But apparently the informant that is involved in this, given names, given, weights, given everything up. So it's going to be interesting to see how far this goes. But I honestly don't feel like at this point that it's, I just don't think it involves anybody of consequence. I could be wrong, but we're going to see what happens. I'm sure within the next couple of days it's going to get a little more interesting. But that is what it is. That's all I know for now. What is amusing, and I'm going to say this for the record because this is something that pissed me off yesterday, and I actually did report on it, but then I decided that it was in the interest of the information not to put it out. I took it down. And the reason why is Dave Schratweiser took to Twitter and was essentially putting out information about the cooperator, describing his crimes, describing who the person was without bringing up a name. And all of those things sort of led back to everybody really jumping on the fact that Anthony Nicodemo was pretty much described in all of his fucking tweets. Now, you can make an assertion there, you can make kind of a bridge-to-bridge jump, but he effectively was trying to say that likely it was Anthony Nicodemo, and then he turns around and he tries to backtrack and says, all you guys are mentioning all these names, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, you're the asshole that came out with the fucking information. You're the one that was talking about third-degree murder charges, somebody who had been in and out of prison. I mean, if you're going to describe a pig and you say it's fat, it's round, it makes grunting noises, you can eat bacon from it, it lives on a farm, rolls in mud. They wrote a children's book, Charlotte's Web, and there was a character named Wilbur. I mean, for fuck's sakes, stand behind what you're going to fucking say. You know, when it comes to opinions and, like, when it comes to, like, court documents, anybody can hand me a court document and I can report on that, right? It doesn't take rocket science to get your hand on that stuff. It becomes very public access. He doesn't have a fucking magic wand, all right? The second thing with Dave Schrottweiser is that, from my perspective, and I don't know Dave at all. I think he's a good journalist. I'm not going to say nothing bad about what he does. But when it comes to his opinions, he doesn't know shit. He never has. This is the same guy that was screaming Joey Merlino was taking a plea deal. It was almost a done deal for like 2.5 weeks. This is the guy that a couple of months ago said Joey Merlino was going to do 50 years and that there was murder and all of this stuff, and none of that was true. So he has repeatedly reported stuff that's very inaccurate. However, the stuff that he has reported in the last couple of days is factual only because he's reading off a criminal complaint. It's kind of hard to fuck that up, but what I think he did was tongue-in-cheek fucking Anthony Nicodemo. I think that's effectively what he did, and then he tried to backtrack on Twitter. Oh, no, I don't know why any of you were saying it's Anthony Nicodemo and this and that and the third, but you sort of put it out there. So, you know, it is what it is, and this is the thing about journalists and everything else is that, you know, from my perspective, and I know there's one particular person that does not care for the things that I say in the negative light about George Anastasia. But the thing is that a lot of the information these guys get come from cops, come from FBI agents. Believe me, they're not getting the information from the streets. I don't think anybody in their right mind is going to talk to them. But I could be very wrong about that. But when it comes to opinion, when I tell you my opinion, doesn't mean it's right. That's simply my opinion of things. That's it. When George talks, it's his opinion. His opinion is not fact. And so that's the thing that I think people really get sort of confused on when it comes to this stuff is, if I say opinion, it's opinion. If somebody asks me, do I think that John Gotti was a good crime boss, I'm going to give you my opinion. That's all it is. Doesn't make me right, doesn't make me wrong. It's just simply an opinion. So neither one of these guys, neither Schrottweiser or Anastasia, went to a single day of the fucking Joey Merlino trial. They don't know the evidence that was presented, mainly because they weren't fucking there, but then they're going to tailor their articles to skew it towards the police. They always have. Jerry Capisci does the same thing. So they tend to write articles that are geared towards the prosecution is really winning. Fuck them, fuck that. I don't do that. I tell you the truth. I tell you how it is. From my perspective, based on facts. Unless it's an opinion, I'll tell you straight up. So that's what's going on in Philadelphia. I'm sure it's going to get a little crazier as time goes on. Circle April 9th on your calendars for some sort of answer to the Merlino issue. And that's sort of what we got for news. We're going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to answer just a couple of questions, and then we're going to talk about Mickey Cohen. And I want to talk about why I picked Mickey Cohen. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Mob Talk Radio. As I said, I'm going to cover a few questions, I think, because I've been getting a lot of questions the last couple days. Some of them are really, really interesting questions. Some include names that I don't really necessarily want to get involved in or talk about, because I don't think it's fair to pigeonhole them or to make... I don't know. I think when you ask a question, you put somebody's name next to it, that makes some sort of assertion that they would be involved in something like this. And I think it's disrespectful to them, and I don't think it's right to them. But in the case of this matter, I'm absolutely going to read it and then give you my answer. Do you think that Joey Merlino or Georgie Borghese will be included in these indictments? I don't absolutely unequivocally know. Neither one of them, as far as I know, are involved in anything. Neither one of the idea that, and I can appreciate where the question comes from, but I can say for 100% that neither one of the individuals that were just mentioned by the person that submitted this question are involved in anything like that. It's ridiculous, and like I said, I think anytime you have indictments, I think people are going to jump to conclusions. People were jumping to conclusions that Joey Merlino was a rat yesterday. That's how crazy the Day Schrottweiser makes people. Because he wouldn't give up a name, but he's going to give up 99.9% of everything else. And I guess that's kind of like journalism. Keep them plugged in, you know. But no, as far as I'm concerned, the names that were mentioned in the question of do I think these two gentlemen will be indicted? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Look, neither one of these guys are that type of person. There's a lot of assertions and a lot of allegations that are made about both of these guys. And I'm here to tell you that none of it's true. I have met George Borghese. I will go on record as saying that he's a great guy. Great guy. I think there's a lot of things and a lot of mystique and a lot of stereotypes and a lot of like ghosts in the closet stories that are made up. George is not that kind of guy. He's a nice guy. He really is. And I think any assertion that's made by law enforcement or by anybody else is absolutely ridiculous. He's not what people describe. He's not what people say. I even said bad stuff about him at one point, and I was wrong, and I admitted that. But the idea that either one of these guys, come on, get real. I mean, this is not. If I had to play a devil's advocate here, business guys do business. Neither one of them would ever be involved in anything like that. I don't even really want to get into this. I don't even like this fucking question. It's not because I can't answer it. It's because it's stupid. Neither one of these guys, if you ever spend any time with them on any level, would find out very quickly they're normal, talkative, warm, caring guys. And I think there's been a lot of things that the media has made up about them, and the media has twisted things about them to make them appear as though there's something that they aren't. I've talked with both of them. Both of them have been nothing but nice to me, cordial to me, warm, giving, caring, and all of that. So, hey, you know what? Ridiculous. Just ridiculous. Just because somebody's got a name value doesn't mean they're involved in every little stupid, chintzy little fucking crime that's going on. And to my knowledge, neither one of these guys is involved in anything. Get real. And I can state that with 100% positivity. I don't know either one of the gentlemen very well, but I will say that having had the opportunity to speak with both of them at different parts and at different places or whatever you want to call it, neither one of them are what the media says. Neither one of them are what law enforcement says. They're really great guys, and that's the end of that. I don't want to push any farther into that. I did want to talk about this. I went and had dinner in Jersey at the Kitchen Consigliere last weekend. I hopped down to Philly with a friend of mine, and the restaurant was fantastic. If you're a mob genre fan and you really like Mafia type of stuff, you can't beat the decor of the Kitchen Consigliere. I was kind of shocked when I walked in, because for a minute I'm like, oh, this is stereotyped, but it was designed and created in such a way that it was really fucking cool. Like, if I was going to fucking have my own restaurant, that's the way I would fucking want it. Just everything from the decor to the music to the ambiance, to the decorations, to the tables, to the fucking tablecloths. Everything was just perfect. Angela Lutz runs the place. A tremendous cook. The food was absolutely good. The prices were fantastic. The service was absolutely, really honest to God. Other than going to Ruth Chris Steakhouse, I think that's the best service I've ever gotten at a restaurant in my life. And I think that's much to do with how Angela runs his business. I think that's much to do with the way Angelo is as a person. He's a great gregarious guy. Isn't afraid to hold back and tell you what he wants to tell you. But the place is absolutely fantastic. I wish I could have eaten more, but I had the veal marsala and cannolis, and I think my buddy had the meatballs and the peppers. Fantastic. If you ever get an opportunity, if you're heading from New York to Philly, stop in Collingswood. Go see Kitchen Consigliere. I think it's at KitCon Cafe, which is on Twitter. Definitely, if you get an opportunity, go sit down, eat a meal there. But listen, make a fucking reservation. This place is not like empty. This place is busy every single night. So make a reservation. Do yourself a favor. Tell Angelo Jeff from Mob Talk sent you. He's going to show you a great time. It's just an experience that I think is great because there's not a lot of places that have mom and pop style food. You can't find that Sunday gravy anywhere in New York. I would drive there every day to eat if I could, but I'm in New York City. He's in Jersey. It's an hour and a half ride. It's a little excessive to drive there every day. That, and I think Angela would probably get a little sick of fucking seeing me, to be honest with you. But if you get a chance, go on Twitter and follow at kitconcafe.com, Kitchen Consigliere. Definitely stop in and see Angelo. Look at the menu online. Follow him on Twitter. Ask questions about the food. Just like I said, I wouldn't steer you wrong. I think it's a fantastic place, and that's exactly why Angelo's doing what he's doing. He's got a talent and a gift for something other than gab. He definitely has the gift for gab, too. All right, so getting on to a question here. Let's see. I got a bunch of them here. Okay. Was Murder Inc. really... Okay. Murder Incorporated, did they really murder over 1,000 people? Was Pittsburgh Strauss the most prolific hitman in the history of the mob? Who orchestrated the hit on Abe Relis? How does the Westies and the DeMeo crew compare to Murder Inc.? Well, first of all, the most prolific mob killer in history might have been Abe Relis himself. I don't think necessarily you have to look at the number that's involved, because there's a guy that could have killed 20 people, but it's who they kill. It's not how many, it's who. Frank Sharon killed some insanely, I don't want to say popular, infamous gangsters himself. He killed Joey Gallo. So I don't think it's necessarily the number that makes you prolific. It's who you kill. Because there's guys that kill guys that are very big in that lifestyle, and it comes with some serious repercussions. As far as Abe Relis goes, in case you don't know who Abe Relis is, just a quick background. Abe Relis was one of the most feared hitmen who worked for Murder Incorporated. In 1940, he was implicated in several murders, and he knew that because he was getting implicated in murders, that the odds are he gets convicted, and he's going to get the death penalty. There's no way around it. So what he does is he becomes probably one of the biggest rats ever in the history of being rats. We can compare rat stories if we want, but there's a reason why I say that, because this was before everybody else was doing it. Yeah, you had Joe Valachi, et cetera, et cetera. But this is really before that became a popular thing to do. And he ended up going on and implicating Louis Lepke in the murder of Joe Rosen, which ultimately Louis Lepke, at the end of the day, gets convicted and executed for. He faced the death penalty for the words of Abe Relis. He also provided information on Louis Capone, Mendy Weiss, Harry Malone, Harry Strauss, Frank Abendano, and Irving Nitzberg, and his childhood friend Bugsy Goldstein. Every single one of them were convicted and executed as a result. So not only was Abe Relis like a fucking killer in the streets, but his mouth got, let's count here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guys fucking executed. 9 guys fucking executed. And so what he ends up doing is his next target is going to be Albert Anastasia. And I don't know what the fuck made Abe Relis think for 1 second he was going to get over on Albert Anastasia. He essentially, I hate using that word effectively, but he essentially ratted out everybody he ever grew up with. took down a large portion of Murder Incorporated. And then he decides he's going to go after Albert Anastasia. And what he does is he tries to tie him up into the murder of Pete Panto, who was a Union longshoreman. Trial ends up getting set for November 12th of 1941. And at the time, Rellis was being kept under constant guard at the Half Moon Hotel on Coney Island. And as history will tell us, the morning of November 12th, 1941, with police guarding the door, Abe Rellis fell to his death from the 6th floor of the hotel. He was essentially the canary who could sing but couldn't fly. There's lots of different stories as to how this went down, but the reality is that Albert Anastasia wanted him dead. And it was Frank Costello who went and paid the officers inside the room $100,000 to toss him out the fucking window. And that's exactly what happened. There's lots of rumors he tried to climb down with a rope. That's ridiculous. Look, Costello paid. The guards went in and killed him. And also, every single one of these guards was demoted after this sort of happened. So the idea that this was just Abe Rellis just decided to dip. Not the case. He was tossed out the fucking window like a paper bag full of trash. So that's that. As far as the Westies and the DeMeo crew compared to Murder Inc., I don't think so. They don't have the numbers. Different sort of technique. I think the DeMeo crew started essentially as a bunch of guys who took out people that got in their way, people who stood in front of the Gambino crime families, sort of rackets, but then it sort of designed and morphed into like just absolutely just brutality and almost like serial killer type of shit. And I think that's the difference being is if you go back to Murder Incorporated, a lot of what they did was business driven, territory driven, respect driven, whereas I think DeMeo initially and Anthony Center and I could just go on and on, Joey Testa, et cetera, Dominic Montiglio. I think that initially they started as a crew that were feared because they would be Paul Castellano's dispatch team. If you fucked with something of his or you fucked with them, you were going to die. But it sort of transferred itself to almost being like serial killer type of shit. And I think once they got towards that level, the game was changed. And I think that's one of the multiple reasons why Roy DeMeo was put on a slab. I'm not necessarily going to get into that. As far as the Westies go, once again, the Westies really weren't serial killers. The Westies didn't fuck around. They took care of business. Jimmy Coonan got a little reckless. And I think one of the biggest problems the Westies had towards the end is everybody that supported Jimmy Coonan felt that he was more loyal to the Italians than his own heritage, which was Irish, and it caused a lot of problems, and ultimately that's why you saw rats like Mickey Featherstone come out of the woodwork as far as that goes. But compared, if the two are together, can you compare them to Murder Inc.? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Murder Inc. could kill a politician. Roy DeMeo and the Westies couldn't. I mean, that's just the reality of it. It's two different time periods, and I think that, not that there's any respect when it comes to murder in any sense of the word, but I think a lot of what Murder Inc. did was political, territorial, respect-wise, versus I think a lot of the stuff that DeMeo and them ended up doing was just sort of serial killer type of stuff. I don't think that there was a lot of stuff towards the end that was justified that they did, but that's just it. Next question is, in your opinion, do you think Carmine Persico deciding to be his own attorney? What do you think about Carmine Persico deciding to be his own attorney? What about Jackie DeNorsco? Who did a better job? In case you don't know, Carmine Persico ended up defending himself. In August of '86, he was obviously, he was on trial for a 25-count federal indictment, which included labor racketeering, extortion, murder, et cetera. He was unhappy with what his attorney was doing. He felt that he knew the case better than his attorney, so he effectively tells Judge Owens that even though he's just a high school graduate, he felt he understood the case better than his lawyer could. He could defend himself better. It was a novel idea in those days, which would make him look sympathetic to the jury as far as he thought. At least that's what the hope was, is that the jury would sort of look at Carmine not as a mob boss or a gangster. It would make Carmine look like a soft, gentle old man who's just trying to defend himself. That was the hope going into it. It ultimately wouldn't work out that way, but that was the hope. But he actually defended himself with decent skills. The problem where it was the co-defendants that he had were getting really shaky and nervous. They didn't like the idea of it, but they were kind of forced to go along with it. They thought he was crazy. But where Carmine really screws up in this is he ends up sabotaging his own defense by admitting to criminal activities. Yes, I've done this in the past. Yes, I've done that in the past. Yes, I've done things like this. What he should have done is just kept it basic. Now, I wasn't there, obviously, so I can't speak for him. But he didn't lend himself the availability to give plausible doubt when he's admitting to A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. He would end up getting convicted and sentenced to 39 years. However, right after this, the judge ends up praising his efforts, saying that his life is a tragedy because he's one of the most intelligent guys he's ever met, and it's a shame that he chose to pick the criminal life over a law-abiding life. As far as Jackie DeNorsco goes, he was a member of the Philadelphia Mafia and the Lucchese's. He was part of one of the longest federal trials in history at 21 months. He and 20 members of the Jersey Mafia, Philadelphia Mafia, and etc. were put on trial on 76 RICO Act predicate violations: loan sharking, extortion, gambling, racketeering, drug trafficking, arson, slew of murders. And Jackie ended up defending every single one of them, and they were acquitted of all charges. So if the question is who did a better job, obviously Jackie did. I know that there was a movie that was going to be made on that, or there was. There may or may not be. I'm not exactly sure. But I do know that he successfully defended 20 people. He's a hero in many circles because of that. It just goes to show. But if you want to look at the polar opposite of that, look at Mad Sam DiStefano, who absolutely tried to defend himself back in the day and absolutely went fucking berserk. You can check out, I think there's, on our YouTube channel, there's a Mad Sam DiStefano show, and I talk about what he did in court. He did some insane shit. He was an insane guy. Some of it's kind of funny in a sick, macabre kind of way, but that's the reality of that. Really quick, before I get on to Mickey Cohen, check out Scott William Collier's page, the True Crime page. He's got a YouTube channel which is coming out. I don't know the exact date. Scott told me earlier what the date was. I can't remember. But he's going to be covering true crime in his own radio blog. I think he's going to cover serial killers and some other stuff. I'm going to help out a little bit with that. But once again, that's his channel. He's going to do what he wants. He's going to talk about it in the fashion he wants. He's from England. He's not from the United States. So do yourself a favor. Give him an opportunity. Give him a chance. He's new at this. I'm throwing my full support behind him. I think he's going to be good at it. I just think, there's a learning curve with anything. I think he's coming out of the gate with Ted Bundy. I'm not sure. But I don't think it's necessarily the macabre aspect of the murders that he covers. It's the psychological aspect of what makes person A do what they do. It's not so much the act of the act or the commission of the crime. It's why they're actually doing it to begin with. To me, that's the more interesting facet part of it. And I think he's going to cover it from that angle. I'm not sure. It's Scott's show. He's going to do what he wants. So follow him on Twitter, True Crime page, I believe, True Crime channel, YouTube as well. And also you can check him out on Facebook at the True Crime page. You can check me out on Twitter at RealMobTalk7 or hit me up on Facebook at Mob Talk Radio. That being said, let's get to Mickey Cohen. Mickey Cohen was a pretty famous guy. A lot of people probably bypass him in the history of the mob. Now, there's nothing like grandiose about him. There's nothing he's uber famous for. But this is a guy that really could control Hollywood. This is a guy that could control the press in Hollywood. And that's a big deal in the time period that he's living in, because not only can they control the starlets and the unions, they can control pictures, the way they're designed, take kickbacks from the studios. It essentially was a really big infiltration into the studio system, which lasted probably right up until around the time of the Godfather movies coming out. That was probably the last stranglehold that the mob had on Hollywood. Russell Buffalino being one of the major people involved in the Godfather movies, which we've talked about at length. But anyway, let's get to Mickey Cohen. Meyer Mickey Cohen was born in Brooklyn, New York, and 1913. Cohen's mother, Fanny, emigrated from Russia, Kiev to be specific, and at age 6, Mickey was selling newspapers on the streets of Brownsville Inn in Soho. Fanny eventually moved the family to Los Angeles, the Boyle Heights section of L.A. In 1923, at age 9, Mickey Cohen gets arrested for delivering alcohol to customers from a gin mill operated by his brother Henry. And he was able to avoid prosecution at 9 years old from his brother Harry and Louis' connections. Harry and Louis were pretty well-known gangsters. Not necessarily gangster, but they're French guys, and they were making a lot of money bootlegging, and obviously they dragged Mickey into it, and Mickey takes a pinch at 9 years old, and the cops aren't going to throw a 9-year-old in prison. So it sort of was an effort on their behalf to sell product and move it without the fear of repercussions of going to jail. What's the worst? Little brother gets pinched, he'll be out, not a big deal. As a teenager, Mickey Cohen begins boxing in illegal prize fights in Los Angeles. In 1929, he ends up moving to Cleveland, Ohio to train as a professional boxer. His first match was against Patsy Carr on April 8th, 1930. Mickey was a prelim fight for the Paul Perone and Jimmy Goodrich bout. On April 11th of 1933, Mickey Cohen would fight Chalky Wright in Los Angeles. Wright would end up winning, and Mickey was incorrectly pronounced as, excuse me, let me rephrase that. Mickey's real name was Meyer, obviously, and as the match was announced in 1933 in April, they mispronounced his name as Mickey instead of Meyer, so that's how he gets the nickname Mickey, just sort of kind of stuck. May 14th of 1933 would be his last professional fight. He fought Baby Arizmendi from Tijuana, Baja California. However, in 1931, Cohen fought and lost against world featherweight champ Tommy Paul after being knocked out 2 minutes and 20 seconds into the first round. So it's safe to say that Mickey Cohen's professional fighting days, he wasn't a good fighter. Let's just be honest. Let's call it like it is. He tried, and he had a couple of hundred. I think he had 100 professional bouts. You can go to the Boxing Association, look up his record. He did win some fights, but obviously that was not going to be the career that would bring him the most financial and respectability. It probably would have been more respected, maybe necessarily. But boxing in those days, just like it is today, is one of the most corrupt fucking sports that there is. Mickey Cohen would end up moving back to New York, where he would become an associate of Tommy Dio, who is the brother of Johnny Dio, and he also became friendly with Oni Madden. These were all tough guys in the street, and he also knew Lou Rothkopf, who was actually an associate of Mo Dalitz. So not only does he have the Capone connections, he's got the Johnny Dio connections, the Oni Madden connections, the Lou Rothkopf connection, which is Mo Dalitz. So he knows some very heavy hitters, and it's not going to be long before he uses those associations and friendships to put himself in a better position. So not long after Prohibition, Cohen heads to Chicago. He immediately, through contacts, joins Al Capone's crime family as an enforcer, which he was, according to sources, very good at, was willing to murder and had no problem. However, during his time in Chicago, he would be arrested for the role in several murders of rival gangsters and a card game that went wrong. He would end up doing prison time, but after his release, he would begin running card games and other gambling rackets. And he also becomes close with Matty Capone, Al's brother, which led to a close relationship with Jake Guzik. If you don't know who Jake Guzik is, look him up. These are hardcore people. realizing that, he had murdered somebody in a card game, he needed to kind of get out of the area, and he knew that Chicago was a dead end for him. He wasn't going to be able to do what he wanted to do. There was too many people, too much wars, too much friction between different groups, and he ends up going to Lou Rothkopf for help. Rothkopf, in return, sends Cohen to Los Angeles to work for Bugsy Siegel, with Meyer Lansky's permission, of course. And one of the things they wanted Cohen to do was oversee stuff. I don't think that they ever trusted Bugsy Siegel with their money, and that was going to be a big problem down the road. But that's the reason why they send Cohen out there. They want him to keep an eye not only on Jack Dragna and the Los Angeles Mafia, but they want him to kind of keep an eye on Bugsy Siegel because they just don't, for some reason, trust him. And they would be right. In 1939, Mickey arrives in Los Angeles. And one of the things that he ends up doing is he partners with Bugsy Siegel and the Flamingo Hotel. Now, his direct involvement in that isn't much, but it's sort of overseen and make sure that things are getting done. And as we know, as history goes, Bugsy Siegel, there were construction delays and money went missing, and Bugsy Siegel's whoring it up, and there were a lot of things that was pissing the mob off. It opened up to lackluster crowds. They had to close it down and effectively restart building certain parts. It wasn't a profit to start, and it really, really pissed the mob off in a lot of ways. The other thing that Mickey Cohen was responsible for was a huge sports book operation, and he actually is directly responsible for the massive racing wire, which was essential to Vegas betting, not only then, but today. He established the racing wire, which was huge. It was huge for Chicago. It was huge for every mob family. So Mickey Cohen, despite everything, even if he is a tough guy with murder, is overseeing certain aspects of what Bugsy Siegel is doing. This is a guy that's putting money together and he's earning. He's establishing the foundation for the Mafia to make some serious coin in Vegas and in Los Angeles. In 1947, problems were beginning. They had issues prior with Bugsy Siegel, which we talked about earlier. The Flamingo was delayed, like we spoke about. It opens up, it bombs at first, but Siegel was essentially integrating himself into Hollywood circles. He was banging Hollywood starlets. He had Virginia Hill as a girlfriend. He sort of became a debutante for Hollywood elites, and that's sort of a problem. They wanted to build this casino, make their money, be sort of left alone. But Bugsy Siegel ends up really wanting to whore it up, and one of the biggest issues was Bugsy Siegel was skimming money off the top. A lot of people have accused him and Virginia Hill, his girlfriend at the time, of skimming off the top, that it was both of them or one of them. But I believe it was Bugsy Siegel was likely skimming off the top. That, when you add the construction delays and everything else that had happened, and he's sort of getting loose-lipped and he's sort of hanging out in circles that people don't like, a guy's going to get killed for that. Mickey Cohen, apparently, according to sources, didn't react well to Bugsy Siegel getting killed. Cohen put word out that he would kill anyone he believed that was involved. He even went to the Roosevelt Hotel where he believed the killers were holed up. He walked into the hotel, he pulled out his .45, fired shots into the ceiling, and demanded the assassins meet him outside in 10 minutes. Nobody ends up showing up, and Cohen fled before the cops arrived. Now, the one thing that's the misnomer about the story I just told is I think he did go to the hotel, and I think he went apeshit. However, you can't tell me when he's sent out to Las Vegas by Meyer Lansky, and he's working somewhat loosely with Bugsy Siegel, that he didn't see that coming. There's absolutely no way he didn't see that coming, and I'll take it a step further. There's no way that he didn't know that was not going to happen. You don't get sent out there by high-end guys, and you're not aware of the situation. I just find it very hard to believe. It may have been the case, but I think, and I'll say this for 99.9% sure, he knew that Bugsy Siegel was probably going to get killed. Maybe his reaction was one that was predicated on showing face. So maybe that nobody could draw him back into the scenario or question him about it. Obviously, that was a Meyer Lansky, Lucky Luciano, et cetera, call. Siegel had to go for a lot of reasons. I also think that Virginia Hill knew this was coming and helped set him up and relax him. Unfortunately, you're probably never going to know who actually physically did it, although I have the names, I think, of who did it. But I think that the idea that Mickey Cohen wouldn't have known about this is a little ridiculous. All right. Not soon after, Italian mob boss Jack Dragna was being investigated due to Cohen's violent methods. Mickey Cohen was going all over fucking town, violent with people, slapping people around, threatening people. And one of the things that happened was because Jack Dragna and Mickey Cohen had sort of an association, was anything that Mickey Cohen did, the law enforcement went after Jack Dragna because they believed that Jack Dragna was the boss of Los Angeles, and they also believed that anything that Mickey Cohen was doing was a direct result of an order of Jack Dragna. The problem is it wasn't true. So federal and state authorities sort of begin to watch Jack Dragna very closely. As a result, Jack Dragna decides he wants to kill Mickey Cohen. You're bringing heat on me. You're causing me problems. I was fine till you came out here. It ends up trying to kill him. They end up bombing his house in Brentwood. And soon after the bombing, Cohen took a lot of his money and sort of turned his house into a castle and a fortress. And obviously, there was sort of going to be a mini war that was going to happen because Cohen wasn't intimidated by Dragna. I think that Cohen ultimately thought he owned Los Angeles and had more juice than Dragna. And he would even... Mickey Cohen would go out and hire the infamous Johnny Stompanato to be his bodyguard. But obviously later on, Stompanato would be killed by Lana Turner's daughter, Cheryl Crane, which is a historical thing. She ended up stabbing him, which I think is... That whole entire murder is something else. You got to look into that if you're into that kind of thing. Maybe Scott can look into that one, the murder of Johnny Stompanato. In 1950, Mickey begins getting investigated along with other mobsters by the Kefauver Commission. As a result, Cohen would be convicted of tax evasion and sentenced to 4 years in prison. As he gets released, he just starts setting up shop again and begins to be sort of an international celebrity. He begins appearing on TV, on news stations. He does an interview where he admits to being a killer, quote, unquote, I have killed no men that in the first place didn't deserve killing. So now Mickey Cohen's getting a little reckless. His bravado has reached a different peak. And that's dangerous. That's highly dangerous. I think the minute that you become the celebrity, you do the interviews, you brag about murdering people, that's going to create a big problem from where you're at. With his legal profits, he began buying floral shops, paint stores, nightclubs, casinos, gas stations, and actually an ice cream store on San Vicente Boulevard in Brentwood. He was a smart guy. He took profits from his legal businesses and he bought legitimate enterprises. But the problem is that you can buy all the legitimate fucking enterprises you want in this world. But if you continue to talk to reporters, you continue to talk to newspapers, you continue to admit that you're a fucking murderer, you're going to bring massive heat down. 1961, Mickey Cohen gets convicted again of tax evasion and gets sent to Alcatraz. He was the only prisoner ever to be bailed out of Alcatraz, his bond being signed by Chief Justice Earl Warren, which, if Earl Warren sort of rings a bell, if you've ever heard of the Warren Commission, i.e. John F. Kennedy, that was why the commission was named after that. Chief Justice Earl Warren. So Warren Commission, you can look that up. He would repeatedly appeal his case, but he failed. Then he ends up getting transferred to Atlanta United States Prison, where in Atlanta an inmate named Bill Estes McDonald tries to kill Cohen with a lead pipe. That is likely a reaction of the mob trying to silence Cohen, shut the fuck up, stop talking, stop doing articles, stop giving interviews, stop trying to be a Hollywood celebrity, stop admitting to crimes. I think more than anything, I don't think that was a warning shot. I think they tried to kill him, but it just didn't happen. And so in 1972, Mickey Cohen ends up getting released from prison. And he would continue to tour the United States after he got out of prison, appearing on TV shows and doing more interviews. Lucky for him, in 1976, he dies in his sleep. One of the more interesting facets to Mickey Cohen, is that just he was able to infiltrate himself incredibly well into the movie production business. So we're going to get into that. But let's look at the Cohen crime family and the Siegel crime syndicate for just a second. Bugsy Siegel started, essentially, realistically, it was Meyer Lansky who started it. Siegel ran it in the 1930s, and it was designed for gambling, Vegas, prostitution. It was founded and run by Jewish mobsters, but it was considered part of the Italian Mafia because Siegel and Cohen's associates with New York and Chicago families. They were associated with a lot of Italian mob families, and even though they're high-ranking members, they had a lot of high-ranking members and soldiers that were Jewish. The majority of Cohen's members and Bugsy Siegel's members were actually Italian. So there was more of an Italian conglomerate than it was actually a Jewish conglomerate. They operated under the Italian structure, the rules and customs. The only thing that they didn't do was they didn't employ the made man structure, so to speak. It was sort of kind of like, come one, come all. We've got the same principles. Let's just go for it. After Bugsy Siegel gets killed, Cohen inherited literally everything. He inherited all the rackets, which he wouldn't have been able to do without the blessing of Meyer Lansky. That's just God's honest truth. And it would cause a power struggle between him and Jack Dragna, who was actually, prior to running his own crime family, was in Bugsy Siegel's organization. He was a high-up lieutenant in Bugsy Siegel's organization, which effectively caused what we call the Battle of the Sunset Strip. The Battle of the Sunset Strip began once Bugsy Siegel got killed. Cohen just absolutely refused to allow Dragna to think that he was number one in the city. He did not want to get back behind him in line, and it pretty much infuriated Dragna. And Dragna would go behind Cohen's back and recruit some of his men. He brought on Dominic Brooklier, and would go on to kill several of Cohen's men, such as David Ogo and Frank Nicoli and Needle Hebert and Harold Hookie Rothman. However, Cohen effectively gets really lucky. He gets indicted again for tax evasion. That's the thing that saves his life, because I don't think that he would have... You can only run from bombs and bullets for so long in your life, and I think that Cohen's number was coming up. Dragna had the edge, I think, even though I do think that Cohen had more power and was more violent than Dragna and probably a lot more intelligent than Dragna. That really ended up saving his life. And as a result of, while Mickey Cohen is in jail, Dragna sees his empire crumble as Frank L. Shaw, who is the mayor who Dragna owned, ends up getting recalled and charged with corruption. So whatever juice Dragna had politically to control the city, he lost when Frank L. Shaw gets arrested on corruption charges. And then at the time, Attorney General Warren, prior to being Chief Justice, went full balls in against Jack Dragna. He told the entire police force, we're going to go after Dragna. Not Cohen, Dragna. February 14th, 1950, the California Commission on Organized Crime singled out Jack Dragna as the head of all organized crime in Southern California, much to Mickey Cohen's laughter. He thought it was hilarious because Mickey Cohen was the juice. And yet he's done all this crazy shit, appeared on TV, won't shut his mouth, and Jack Dragna's taken it in the ass. I mean, it is kind of funny in sort of a cathartic, weirdo, gangster kind of way. It is kind of funny to me. And then not long after the California Commission on Organized Crime names Jack Dragna public enemy number one, a bunch of his men get arrested for bombing Mickey Cohen's house, which makes Cohen laugh even harder, because not only now is Jack Dragna going to take it into the ass, but all the people that were likely going to kill him are going to go to prison. Then William H. Parker, who was chief of police, ends up taking over as chief of police, obviously, and he launches a crackdown on organized crime, but not on Mickey Cohen, on Jack Dragna. And that's essentially what took down the Los Angeles crime family. It weakened Los Angeles, and they lost ground in that territory to New York and Chicago. And so in many ways, Mickey Cohen knew what the fuck he was doing. He outlasted the one guy that wanted to kill him the most. One of the things that made Mickey Cohen really, really interesting, besides his temper, was that he owned the media. Back in those days, I think that there's actually a video game called L.A. Noire, which is really fantastic. If you go back to the movie L.A. Confidential with Danny DeVito and Russell Crowe, it takes place in a time where these hush-hush magazines would give sordid details and creepy stories about, yes, and this person sleeping with that person. And they would repeatedly out people that were gay. They would repeatedly out people that were banging. And it was an effort to control the studios. It was an effort to control the starlets, an effort to control unions. And one of the things that was interesting was Mickey Cohen owned all these people. Albeit by fear, albeit by, if you don't do what I ask, I'm going to have you killed. He owned them. He could plant articles, he could plant information, and the papers, not LA Confidential, but like the Hollywood Confidential would report on it, and he was basically tipping everybody off, so he could control the way the media spun things in Los Angeles, and that was fantastic for Mickey Cohen. He was also super connected to the movie studios, and we talked a bit about that the other day. His friendship with Harry Conn enabled him to move around. Harry Conn obviously was a fucking monster. If you think this Me Too movement shit is crazy now, if you go back to the days of Harry Conn, believe me, Me Too would have been... that would have been just the beginning of the end, because he was a fucking animal, that guy. And Harry Conn, so pretty much for the most part, allowed Mickey Cohen and Bugsy Siegel to control all the Hollywood extras by setting up insurance businesses as shakedowns to keep the film sets under control. If you control the film sets, you control the production, you control the money, you control the shakedowns, you control the insurance. It was a fantastic moneymaker. If there was a strike or there's an issue, Mickey Cohen steps in right away and handles it. It's the same way that New York controls the unions. You don't want to give kickbacks to the gangsters that run the unions. Okay, well, the union workers aren't going to work. You're not going to get a delivery of wood. You're not going to get a delivery of cement for the next 6 months. You're going to go fucking bankrupt. And that's the way the labor unions work, and that's effectively what Mickey Cohen did. Harry Conn, who was the president of Columbia Pictures, who I believe I talked about the other day, only came into power through mob funding. He could have never bought Columbia Pictures without the mafia's money, and he ends up sending Mickey to Las Vegas to lean on Sammy Davis Jr. At the time, Sammy Davis Jr. was dating Kim Novak, who was white, and Conn felt it would ruin Novak's career by dating an African American. So he sends Mickey Cohen out there, and Mickey really point blank looks at Sammy and says, dump her or you're dead. We're going to fucking kill you if you don't do something. And there's nothing that Sammy picks up the phone and calls Frank Sinatra, explains the situation. Sinatra's not getting involved in that. And the best advice that Sinatra gave Sammy Davis Jr. was, do as they ask. It's not worth your life. And then years later, as Sammy Davis Jr. actually married Mai Britt, another white actress, Sinatra was one of the very few that stood up for Sammy. He was his best man at his wedding. Frank didn't have a racist bone in his body. He never saw color. He always saw in color. Everything was colors of the universe and the rainbow. It was never a black or white issue for Frank. But this particular situation was a situation where you have the head of a studio who is barking orders and then has the mob to back it up. And it was a no-win situation for Sammy Davis Jr., and he essentially dumps her, and Novak would go on to have a long career. Mickey Cohen would also have, he would hire a crew of very young, good-looking, muscular, attractive guys, and he would use them to seduce famous starlets for blackmail information. So he goes out and hires all these good-looking guys, muscle-clad guys, young guys, and he gets them to go out and basically bang these starlets to get all their little juicy, dirty secrets that he could turn around and say, okay, we've got photos of you doing this. We know you're doing that. If you don't do this or that, we're going to tell the papers. And if Mickey Cohen controls the papers like the Hollywood Confidential, then he's essentially shaking down everybody. Two of his men actually filmed themselves in a three-way with Marilyn Monroe, and they threatened her that unless she told them what JFK was saying privately about the Jews and about the Israeli state, then not only would the video be shown, but she would be killed. So long before, so once again, Marilyn Monroe gets involved in a three-way with some people. It's filmed. Mickey Cohen goes to her and says, you tell me what JFK's opinion is on Israel and what he's going to do with them. If you don't, not only is this film going to come out, we're going to fucking kill you. But also he could do that because they're the ones who got Marilyn Monroe in the studio system to begin with. Had it not been for Harry Kahn, who was told by other people that they would sign Marilyn Monroe to a third. I think we talked about Johnny Roselli going out and effectively telling Harry Kahn, you're going to sign Marilyn Monroe to a multi-picture deal, even though she was a fucking unknown at the time. And Harry Kahn does it because he's owned by the fucking mob. And as you see, Johnny Roselli goes and takes care of that. Johnny Roselli goes to move on to business in Vegas. And then Mickey Cohen comes through and threatens Marilyn Monroe because they owned her. They owned her at that point. And then just moving on far, as far as that goes historically, with Marilyn Monroe and the mob and the Kennedys and Peter Lawford, which we talked about in the last show. So the Johnny Roselli show and the Mickey Cohen show are sort of like together because Mickey Cohen knew Johnny Roselli very well. They were not partners necessarily, but like I said the other day in the show, when Johnny Roselli was producing pictures on films, the labor costs were down, the unions were controlled, and they were controlled much through Mickey Cohen because of the juice that he had. So it's just amazing to me the parallels of these two guys working in the same areas. Really, their whole lives kind of paralleled themselves. The only difference, I believe, really, truly, at the end of the day was Johnny Roselli was a negotiator and Mickey Cohen was a killer. That's the difference. Johnny Roselli would try to negotiate with you, and if he couldn't get it done, then shit would happen. Mickey Cohen didn't fucking negotiate. It's this or you're gone. And that was sort of the life of Mickey Cohen. I've always felt like he was one of the bigger deals in Los Angeles. He was bigger than Jack Dragna could ever fucking hope to be. He controlled Jack Dragna as far as I'm concerned. He was tougher than Dragna. He was able to insert himself into so many more rackets than Dragna was. And so I think there's a natural rivalry there. And Mickey Cohen dies on his own. He doesn't get shot up, doesn't die in prison. He dies in his own home of an old age. So there's something to be said for that. I sort of admire a guy who's spent his whole life being a criminal and doesn't die in prison. Dies in his own home. That's very rare. But Mickey Cohen was a tough guy, and he truly utilized people that were more powerful than him to put him in positions of power, and then he would just maintain. He didn't need to go above and beyond. He just needed to maintain. And the mistake that Jack Dragna made was trying to fuck with Cohen, to try to kill him, to try to outmaneuver him. Meanwhile, Cohen just says, go right ahead, get lucky if you can. And he just plays he just lets Dragna get so fucking crazy that he's going to try to bomb his house. It ends up getting everybody pinched, brings down the whole entire Los Angeles Mafia at the time. And Mickey Cohen lives out the rest of his life laughing hysterically about it. Good luck. Nice shot, Jack. You fucked up and you're wrong. And if you look historically, LA's really never had anything since. Little fringe guys here and there. Now they got a Gambino conglomerate out there. But that's the story of Mickey Cohen. I suggest, seriously, it's a really good read. Especially if you're into like vintage stories about old Hollywood. Definitely Harry Kahn, C-O-H-N, Mickey Cohen, C-O-H-E-N. Look up Hollywood Confidential and old smut magazines like that told these seedy stories of people. Watch L.A. Confidential again. Get the game L.A. Noire. It's fantastic. It's a time period in our life where things were so different, where Hollywood starlets were Hollywood starlets and not like spokesmen for fucking company after company. They were controlled who they dated. There was fictionalized marriages to try to protect one's sexuality. The things in the heyday of Hollywood were just so fucking completely different than they are today, and I find it very intriguing. You go to The Godfather 2, and you use, the sequence where Johnny Fontaine is trying to get the movie role. That was taken directly from Frank Sinatra, From Here to Eternity. Frank needed the mob to lean on directors to get him the job, and they did. You can draw parallels to this story as well. So it was sort of the golden era of Hollywood, and it's very seedy, it's very dark, and it's fantastic. So anytime that I can sort of immerse myself in that type of stuff, I like to. It's just a different time period. It's just a different time period. But look up all of those things. Look at the history of Columbia Pictures, and you're going to read about some just insane shit of how things were operated back in the day. That's the show that we got for Mickey Cohen. We'll be back next week with Danny Green. Send your complaints, comments, grievances, threats to the same usual places. If you're out in this New York weather today in the blizzard, because it's a blizzard, be safe. Get yourself some coffee. Get under an awning if you're going to smoke. And don't take your fucking animals out in this shit. Take them out to let them piss and bring them in the house. Don't leave animals out in the cold. It's not cool. Have a great week, everybody. We'll be back next week, where we'll talk about Danny Green, some more questions, and I'm sure there'll be more stuff to update on Philadelphia. So, have a great week, everybody.